Well, good afternoon, Lydia. How's it
Hi,
going?
Sarah. How are you?
Doing great. Appreciate you getting together. I know we took a week off, so it's really good that we're back at it because we got so much to talk about.
Absolutely super excited and a ton of good information.
Definitely. So, we talked about recently, CFPB is kind of breathing down the neck of all of our loan servicers. They're really making sure everybody's got their ducks in a row because that's what they're looking for to find. And, these servicers are going to make sure that they don't put an inch out of line. You know that. And so this is going to be a good thing for our struggling borrowers. The days of lax info on forbearance from those servicers, those are numbered and so the biggest piece of advice that we can offer you right now is if you're a struggling borrower, when you talk to your servicer, you get everything in writing, track and document everything because there's too much unknowns and confusion out there. And I know, Lydia, you were talking about one of your buddies is kind of going through that right now.
Yep. So I have a friend that's going through that right now, and she was going to actually do a refi, and she's not eligible until May. So, so she found out that she potentially could lose her job. So of course she called her bank and said, what can I do? And they looked her up and they said, you are eligible for a forbearance. So she calls me, her friend and realtor, and says, okay, I know you talk a lot about forbearances and I don't understand it. So how does this work? She goes, what I'm thinking is doing the forbearance February, March, and April, and then refinancing in May when I can. And I go, oh, no, 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 no. You cannot do that because people assume that you can refinance right after you do a forbearance, and you can, but you have to make 3 consecutive payments. And not only that, but what they offered her was to the 3 months that they didn't she didn't pay, she had to put that towards the next few months. So they divvy it out over like a 6-month period. Well, if you can't afford your $1,700 house payment, that's a regular payment, what makes you think you can afford a $2,000 house payment in 3 months? What's going to change in 3 months? So you just have to be really careful. You have to think through not just what's going to help me today, but what's going to help me 3, 6, 12 months down the road.
Exactly. This is really important to be forward looking at these things, at the situations.
Absolutely. Yes.
So
you don't want to get stuck into something. Yeah, I was going to say, you just don't want to get stuck into something that you can't get out of.
Exactly.
You don't want to dig a hole and not be able to get out of it.
And humans are notorious for forward thinking, always optimistically, and we just, we don't know. So what we do know, though, is the latest forbearance numbers are actually showing improvement. I have to apologize for my crying dog. They do show improvement. The total number of loans in forbearance is right around 5.29%, or about 2.6 million. And that is a decrease of about 100,000 since Lydia and I did our last our last video 2 weeks ago. So that's really showing that's a big improvement. And, Mike Fratantoni at the Mortgage Bankers Association is really talking about that he's expecting to see a lot of continued improvements between the vaccines and job improvement, things like that. But what's really important is we always want to look at where are we in our forbearance, situation by stage. And so when we look at the initial stage decrease, that number is about 16% of all loans in forbearance. They're in the initial stage in those first 30 days or first 3 months. The extensions, that has increased yet again. It's a little over 81%. And that's really where the most of, the borrowers that are in forbearance are staying. And, we also have reentries. It's right around 2.5%, but it's those extensions. And that kind of really continues with what we're going to talk about in delinquencies. But, so as we continue to watch these, what we do know about the forbearance exits. So if everybody that is exited from June 1st through February 7th, we're right around just under 44% are current. They're either made up their payments before exiting or they remain current the whole time. So that's a really nice chunk. Now we've had some others with, they sold it, deed in lieu, stuff like that. But the real numbers to look for is the 13.8% of borrowers that are leaving their forbearance plan with no loss mitigation plan in place. That's the group that really is going to need to know that they have options. And that's where we've been really like, let's talk to these people. And just to get an idea in mind, that say that if all the 2.6 million borrowers exited forbearance today based on these percentages, it would be about 348,000 that are exiting that need help. So, and that's nationwide. So we know that it's not a gigantic number that's going to destroy our market, but it's not insignificant, and it will definitely impact, you know, particularly their lives, but the, you know, the overall economy, things like that.
Right.
So, you know, we look at, so, you know, I like to look at what's going on with forbearance. These are active, you know, people in a program that is actively trying to, you know, have a solution. We also can look at delinquencies. Now, the delinquency numbers actually include anybody late who's also in forbearance. So this is going to be a little bigger number because not everybody who's behind is in a plan, a forbearance plan, but we're looking at right around 6.73% are the total loans that are delinquent. Now, and that was actually, that number is from Q4 of 2020. And even though that number is big and a little scary, one of the biggest takeaways is we actually, from Q3 2020 to Q4 2020, we had a 0.92% decrease in loans in delinquency. That is the largest drop of, you know, ever recorded since they started tracking this data in 1979. So good news, we've got, you know, all of it's going down, and now in all 30, 60, 90, all loan types, delinquencies are dropping. The biggest thing that also is really cool, 30-day lates have reached their lowest since 1979. So again, we're pretty good shape with our 30-day lates. 60 and 90-day lates, you know, they also decrease, but 90-day lates, that's really the group. And it makes sense because this is also the group that's an extension in forbearance. They're the ones, they're about 5% of all mortgages. That's again going to be the group that's struggling the most, that's going to need help. You know, it's going to be a big number. We just have to figure out all the math on that one.
Yeah.
So we'll get that. And, you know, and we also, you know, so based on a lot of these numbers, there have been a lot of, you know, more news of timeline changes. And a lot of that is, so forbearance, foreclosure, and the eviction moratorium, all of it has been extended now through June 30th, 2021, which means any borrower that wants to get started on a forbearance plan, they can get started by, you know, they now have through June 30th. Keep in mind, the initial CARES Act put the placement of the expiration of this October of 2020. So it has been pushed so many times already.
We're kicking the can down the road a little bit further. So,
and that's actually one of the things that we really want to talk about is, you know, it's great to have solutions and to have, you know, a Band-Aid. But one of the things that, you know, Lydia and I were just talking about is, what does that mean? Are these borrowers losing their equity? And what kind of position will that put them in? How far down the road? You know, that's really one of the questions is, you know, we know we've got a ton of equity. We know we've got a lot of stuff happening. And, you know, our inventory levels are so low, we are experiencing mass quantities of appreciation. So yes, while all of this is true and all of this is happening, we also have borrowers in this position that are losing equity based on not making payments, you know, and so we don't know to what extent though.
Exactly. And people don't understand that when they do a forbearance, at some point that does have to get paid back. So the longer it is taking them to pay that back, the more fees there are, the more, and you know, just because you do a forbearance does not mean that there's no late fees. So people need to understand that as well. When I was on the call back in August with the director of Freddie Mac from in Washington, D.C., he basically said to us that were on the call, make sure you tell your homeowners that they need to have an exit strategy, because people got into these in a hurry when COVID first hit, and there wasn't a lot of documentation from the servicing companies or the banks at that point. Now, since it's gone on we're at about a year now, so the forbearances have changed, and the banks are now getting better about getting documentation in and things like that. But that still doesn't mean that you need to be responsible as homeowners to your own, your own situation. So the longer you wait to do something with that forbearance or whatever the plan is, the less equity that you end up in your pocket. And that's the concern I have, because I mean, yes, they've extended it, but how much less money are you going to get? We're at the lowest amount of homes on the market right now. And I'm not saying that everybody has to sell, because that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if you're going to eventually sell anyway, sell now, because you don't have to fix up your home to get top dollar. You don't have to, you don't have to change the water heater and the air conditioner and do that painting. We are so desperate for listings right now that people will take whatever needed. And what I like to try to tell people when they're not really sure what to do with their home is, let's package it up. Instead of just selling it to one iBuyer or one investor, let's package it up and get it to all the investors, including the iBuyers. Let them have a little frenzy between themselves if you don't want to have it on the open market. Because getting an investor group together, I had an instance with one of my probates where it was a rundown. It had been vacant for 10 years. It was a boarded up home. And literally, Sarah, we put it on the market and I got over asking within 1 hour. And the investor had already gone to the property, looked at the property, got the offer in and sent it to me. And it was over asking already. And we already calculated, the price we calculated, we took into consideration all the things that was wrong with the house to begin with. So what I'm saying is, if you are considering selling your home in this market, which we desperately need the listings, you don't have to do all those things to the home. Do you get more money when you do? Yes. I had another client that we put an offer in, and we were a cash buyer, well over asking, and we were one of 75 people, and we did not get the offer. So there's
75 buyers wrote on that house.
On one house.
Wow.
So it's crazy. I mean, right now people are desperate, and they will, if someone's looking in a particular subdivision or neighborhood, they'll go outside just to, they're
Yes.
really
Oh no, oh, there you came back. But absolutely. Yeah. And so anybody who's considering selling, anybody who's thinking they're weighing out that options, as long as they have a place to go, if even downsizing or anything, this is a really good time where you get really top dollar and get out of this situation, because we just don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, and it's
right.
Was it make hay when the sun shines? So
well, and we're at, when we started this, back in, I don't know, September, August. June timeframe, August, whenever sure. It was, our inventory at that time was about 7,000. We now have 4,000 active listings in all of the MLS. 4,000 is nothing for a normal market. We need about 25,000 to 30,000. This is how low we are. And people don't realize, you and I realize it because we're in the industry and all of our realtor friends understand it, but the general population doesn't understand it, and they don't know what their home is worth. And that's why some of these that are being bought by iBuyers, which I get why they do it, but there's other ways to get more money than what they're getting with just one investor.
For sure.
For
sure.
Awesome. Yeah. So but as Americans and as Americans and as homeowners, we need to take our own responsibility of our own fate, of what we need to do for our own families and what's going to be best for us. Because didn't you just say that the government is the one that they're the biggest ones that are buying those
the Fed has purchased over $7 trillion in mortgage-backed securities. That's been way that they've been able to maintain these incredibly low rates. because they know what it's done for our market, which is good because we know if rates go up, it will be very difficult to afford anything considering the appreciation. The low rates make things so much more affordable today. But we also know that given that, since the Fed owns so much of the mortgage-backed securities, they don't want lots of defaults on their hands either. They, they're like, we can't sustain it. So, but that's a whole other political conversation that we can save for
another time. And we'll talk about that in the future, because I think that is important for people to understand. People don't understand how the whole thing works as a whole. So, I mean, if people just understood the basics of how it worked, then they could have a better, understanding of their own information. So we as Americans and as homeowners need to manage our own situation, and we can't control everything, but we can control what we do with our own family and our own home and our own situation. So sorry, my dog's in the background barking. So, but with that, we'll be here next week and we'll discuss more and get more information. And as always, Sarah, thank you for all the data that you put together every week. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Lydia, for your time and your expertise in this. And we'll be talking again next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.